Montreal Take 2, Episode 2. Last week we went places, this week we're going to go for walks. And in them we will go to Rue Ste Catherine, Rue St-Denis, the Golden Mile and the Plateau. It is how they say it here, Plateau, not Plateau. It's spelled the French way. Anyway, let's go already, and our first walk starts here, in Rue Crescent. Conveniently, just around the corner from the Fine Arts Museum, which we visited last week, and so should you. Anyway, Rue Crescent is one of Montreal's most iconic streets, lined on both sides with those wonderful Victorian or maybe Edwardian terraces, home to the better known of two Leonard Cohen murals in Montreal. Don't worry, I will show you the other one. The location of small art galleries, quirky shops, as well as the site of Canada's first jean laundry, which, as jeans existed way before, begs the question what happened in 1972, but never mind. The bottom section of Rue Crescent is Party Street, which, like most places in Canada, is much better in the summer, or at least was when we last visited. And it is here where we turn onto Rue Ste Catherine, the subject, the object and the destination of this walk. It is a very long street by convention divided into west and east. The west is here for the last 150 years being the heart of Montreal's retail commerce. It wasn't planned this way, but from the 1870s onwards, Rue Ste Catherine just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Halfway between the old town on one side and the new town and the Golden Mile on the other. As a result, there were once here more famous department stores than I can name or remember, with the fanciest section stretched here around Phillips Square. What was it? This one where we sat on the roof and had a drink? Can practically see those ladies who lunched whiling away a few hours at Morgan's, later acquired and rebranded by Hudson's Bay, recently bankrupt, so who knows what this fantastic building will house next, or scouting for their next set of pearls at Berri's. Many of their children and grandchildren would later on live around here in apartments, as increasingly they could no longer afford the upkeep and the taxes on the family mansions. It is amazing how family fortunes seldom last beyond the second generation. But anyway, the advent of public transportation, Montreal's first tramline run straight down the middle St. Catherine's West, made the shops accessible to more and more customers. And even though the later part of the 20th century with its suburban sprawl and suburban malls didn't do it any favors, it is still alive and coming back. Because all these new towers popping up everywhere in the vicinity, for all their trying might have as much personality as a TikTok dance, but they do mean a lot more new people who will live here because they do want to go out and they do want to shop within walking distance. So here is to 150 more years of St. Catherine's West. Let's hope that whatever of the old charm is still standing will be restored and preserved. And let us now proceed to St. Catherine's East, which to me starts here at Place des Arts, even though we haven't yet crossed the official east-west divide, the St.Lawrence Boulevard. It is one of those spots in Montreal that are quite for sure better in the summer. And it is here that Rue Ste Catherine stops being about retail commerce and becomes all about the show and other forms of entertainment, which is its other time-honored role. Well, you've come all the way down here on the tram, you do your shopping in the afternoon and stay for dinner and the show. The Place des Arts is anything but pretty. It was the 70s and we now have to live with the consequences.
But do keep going because, well, there will be some weird and wonderful. It is beyond here that Rue St. Catherine, now officially St. Catherine East, becomes authentic. So, as a bonus, in addition to life as it is for regular people, you get this wonderful mixture of new and old, quirky and quite ordinary, well-kept and falling apart, and so on. It just keeps on going and surprises you every step of the way. So while this may not and indeed shouldn't be the first walk you will want to take in Montreal, of course you need to see the old town, Place Royale where it all began, Rue St. Paul where you can have a drink or a meal at 3 times the price it should be, and then see the 19th century, the Registry Square, the Golden Mile, the McGill campus, climb the hill that puts the Mont in Montreal. There is all that, and there is also the Plateau that's, by the way, coming up. But there's a lot to be said for Rue St. Catherine, especially if you can catch it during the golden hour. Also, when we first visited in the summer, it had a lot of public pop-up spaces. A small urban beach here, some swings there, a mini playground for kids, a weird sculpture you could climb. They were all free of charge. Somebody might be selling something nearby, but you weren't obliged to buy. And, as Gremlin was much younger, were an absolute godsend to us. And you can see them, and a lot of other things that we saw and did in Take 1, in the videos I made back then, and I'm linking in the description. Full disclosure, they're terrible. Yes, even worse than this one. But I did an awful lot of research back then, included the stories, the history, old photographs, maps, paintings, even had time to write proper articles for the blog. So, it's all there, with links to sources. If you want to dig, go dig. And meanwhile, we've turned off Rue St. Catherine at Rue Berri, which at this section has fallen victim to the 1960s, 70s and 80s and so is full of concrete horrors. Rue St. Catherine East does go on beyond Rue Berri, through a pretty neighborhood called The Village, including a section called Gay Village, which, from reading about it in the warmer weather, becomes pedestrian only and a little party town of its own. But that again would be in the summer, and now it's not summer. Now it's a slight minus in Celsius and winds are howling, and we are headed to a different party town, which is this section of Rue St-Denis between Rue St. Catherine West and Sherbrooke. Sherbrooke does feature highly in this episode. We could have cut it short and just head straight here, but if we did, we'd be missing out on the real life-ness of Rue St. Catherine East. And that would have been a huge mistake, right? So we're back here in the show district, and if you're an organized kind of person, you could organize some tickets. But if you aren't, no worries. Just pick a place, any place, and enjoy your evening. This here, by the way, being the evening of Good Friday. So if you were headed here for the Easter holiday weekend and were concerned about holiday closures, don't be. It's pumping. The crowd all sounds local, which is a major bonus in our eyes because we do like to do as the locals do. The gazillion different restaurants includes our particular favorite. There is music and lights and colors. Wonderful place to spend an evening, and then poof! By the morning, magic's gone. So, since we haven't turned into pumpkins, let us move to our second walk, which, were it the full version, I would call the Golden Mile Walk. But it will not be that because, frankly, it was too cold and we didn't have the time. Golden Mile is a posthumous name. It was a much larger area, sandwiched between Sherbrooke and the mountain and vaguely centered on Peel Street, developed from the 1860s onwards, which, at its peak in 1880s and 1890s, something like 80% of all money in Canada called its home, i.e. where it lived in the most stupendous mansions. We did do it all in take one, and again there is a lengthy and unbearable video attached, in which I went to tiresome lengths to explain the history and the fate of most of the villas that are still standing and several of those that no longer are, and the full story of how it came about after the Great Fire of 1852, which consumed the best part of old Montreal. At which point it occurred to some of the wealthier citizens that if you moved outside the city, you could have a bigger, better house, and also you were less likely to roast in it because your neighbor forgot to put out a candle, and how from 1950s onwards it almost entirely disappeared, leaving precious little behind. So today we'll be doing a very short version of it, which I shall call the McTavish Walk, which fittingly enough goes up McTavish Street along the western fence of McGill's main campus, which in itself is also very fitting, as Simon McTavish, the theme of this walk, and James McGill were friends and business partners and built what was to become the first houses of the Golden Mile. Well, in Simon's case, almost become. The McTavish Castle was almost finished when, in the winter of 1804, Simon himself was supervising the last works, caught pneumonia and died. His wife and children promptly moved to England, where she wouldn't go before with Simon, and so for over 50 years the house stood empty, generating reports of Simon dancing on the roof or sleighing down the hill in his coffin. It was only in the 1860s that this house Braeburn was built on the site, using Simon's original materials, still apparently good to go. There are no reports of McTavish haunting here, so with Scottish frugality he must have approved. This, by the way, is Montreal's second water reservoir, built in the 1860s after the first one failed in such a spectacular way in the fire of 1852. It is still in operation under that football field and is called, you'd never guess, McTavish. So this was Simon's almost house, Simon's front garden, and now we shall see the one thing we did miss last time, namely Simon's grave. It is hidden in the woods and accessed by this overgrown path, which is marked out, but these are the sort of markers that you won't see unless you know you're looking for them. Otherwise, it's suitably romantic and solitary, even this early in the spring where there isn't much life in evidence. The weird thing being it runs not 50 meters away from the most popular trail up the mountain, which is, as already mentioned, one of the things you will want to do on your first visit to Montreal. Amazing view from the top and well worth the climb. But we've already done it, so let's go back to what we haven't, i.e. Simon's grave. It started off above the ground, exposed to the elements and uninvited guests. So after a few decades, the family, tired of the constant repairs, simply buried the whole thing. Minus the very distinctive column, which survived until 1940s, at which point the city of Montreal decided that its oldest monument wasn't worth maintaining, and replaced it with this tasteful headstone. That's sarcasm, by the way. Simon McTavish is still down there somewhere, and if he does come out, so is his favorite view, if a little changed from his day. And while here you may say the change is for the better, you cannot say the same about Hugh Allen's gardens at Ravenscraig, right here. This is Ravenscraig itself, true to its name in being perched on top of the McTavish Hill, but these days looking nothing like the most opulent house of the Golden Mile that it used to be for at least 40 years. Royalty stayed here when visiting Montreal. The functions were Commonwealth famous, donated to Victoria Hospital by the second generation that could no longer keep it. Today Ravenscraig is a psychiatric clinic, and if anything looks even more forlorn than when we last saw it 4 years ago. There was some talk then about it reverting to the family and being converted into luxury apartments, but
quite apparently no such luck yet. Unlike in the case of the Victoria Hospital itself, which is in the process of some sort of renewal. Well, fingers crossed for Ravenscraig, and we're now heading east on Pine Avenue, which is taking us to the Plateau de Montreal, known as the Plateau, which shall be today's third and final walk. This is the back door to it, which nobody wants, so let me just teleport us to the front door, located here, just off Rue St-Denis at the corner of, guess what, Sherbrooke. This is St. Louis Square, which is square because that's a great shape for a water reservoir, which is what it was. I did promise. It was only used as such for 18 years, opened in 1851 with the Great Fire only a year later. Right from the start it was too small, which is how in the 1870s, after the McTavish took over, it became a sought-after residential area. The park did change over the years. At times there was a lot of water, at times there was none, and today it's a halfway house. At the heart of what started off as the golden mile for the aspiring petit bourgeois. These houses, some of the most photographed in Montreal, so here I am following the trend. They are a part of the original development designed by Vanier and are restored and maintained with great care. But while St. Louis Square itself is the place to go for a pretty frame, do not forget that there are streets upon streets of those here. All you have to do is keep walking and keep your eyes open. They will not, of course, all be fantastic or all well kept. It has been 150 years and the area has had its ups and downs. By the 1920s, the aspiring petit bourgeois moved even further north, beyond the mountain, and less affluent residents followed. Most of them honest people, but then there was the scourge of large residential projects in the 60s, 70s and 80s, aka concrete monstrosities, and we've seen some of those at the end of Walk 1. But it wasn't without its own benefits. This new bohemian crowd contained artists, painters, novelists, poets, who gave this area a distinct flavor. This in turn, as life goes up and down, meant a new wave of gentrification and I suppose higher rents. So, not sure how much of it still remains here and how much of it is just pretend. We shall see more of it in a minute, but for now we shall walk this way, Prince Arthur Street, where various artsy vibes will slowly mix with some indications that we are approaching less salubrious regions, such as the presence of Poles. Hey, there's a home country accent for me. And some a little suspiciously looking nightclubs. And it's all correct and it all makes sense. Because as we turn this corner, it's the St.Lawrence Blvd, also affectionately known as the Main, which fits for several reasons. It has been the main route north from Montreal since the 1600s. After the British conquest, this was the main divide between West and East Montreal, the West generally being English-speaking and better off, well, Scottish-speaking but close enough, and affluent checks out. We already crossed it on our way from the Golden Mile to the Plateau, if you happen to notice the grandma with the Sphinx. Anyway, the East was generally Francophone and Catholic, so that's where the Irish went later on too. But make no mistakes, this was no St. Louis Square. This was a very mixed-use suburb. Industrial, mostly the lighter industry though, the heavier ones congregating around the Lachine Canal. So here was textiles and tobacco and brewing. The latter two especially providing a suitable background for everything else that went on here. Cinemas, theaters, exotic dancers, bars, gambling and prostitution. Well, the beautiful people came here for a bit of illicit fun, but the working classes actually lived here, with the associated layers of trade union and universal suffrage history. I know, boring. Moving on, as people did here all the time. Because while this was close to work and close to the city, it wasn't quite the sort of place you wanted to end up eventually. And so, at the beginning of the 20th century, the Francophone New French people gave way to a wave after wave of immigration.
While this wasn't the Golden Mile, it wasn't the worst slum either. So it was the immigration with some skills and some capital. Shopkeepers, tradespeople. First, it was the Eastern Europeans, Poles, Ukrainians, Czechs and Hungarians, soon replaced by Eastern European Jews, themselves replaced by the Portuguese. Today, this area is known as Portuguese Town, which is not to say that the Jews are entirely gone, with one much touted place that you can especially totally skip, this being Schwartz's Deli. The first time we walked past here looking for the cat cafe, the queue was a good hour long. We didn't intend to come back, but on our second walk, late in the morning, it was open and there was nobody here, so we decided to see what the hoopla was all about. Turned out not much. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a very nice roast beef sandwich, but it is also $25 for a third of a baguette. So for the price of 3 of those in your hand, you can have a really nice sit-down meal in the Greek restaurant just round the corner, which I suggest you do. It is not that we're tight, although we are, we just don't like a rip-off.
Anyway, the 1960s, 70s and 80s haven't been kind to the Main, but with the help of some public funding and public policies, it has since come back. I think this is the only street in the country that is its own historic site. It now displays this decidedly artsy vibe, but do not for 1 minute be deceived by its shabby chic. A 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom flat round here will set you back almost $1 million. And we are now turning onto Rue Duluth because I haven't got enough footage for my yapping. Won't be long now. So I guess artists do live here, but only if they already made their money. Viz. Leonard Cohen. That's him up there in that second mural that I've promised. His last house stands just off the Main, 2 blocks north of here. But for those of us who aren't Canada's best-known experts, well, one has to already have a chunk of change to live in one of those pretty fairy tale houses. The good thing being, you don't have to live here to enjoy it. Here is Rue Duluth, which after Montreal was first mapped after the British conquest, constituted the northern limit of the city, and today is studded with cafes and restaurants, including in particular last week's Châtelet, which we much recommend, especially to cutlass cut lovers. If you follow it all the way down, it will take you past Rue St-Denis, which at this stretch is also filled with restaurants, bars, cafes and quirky shops, all the way to Parc Lafontaine, named after the local politician and not the French translator of Aesop's fables or indeed the fountain here. This, a former farm and military training grounds, is one of Montreal's most carefully landscaped parks, which includes not just the oddly out-of-place ski chalet type of restaurant building, but also an outdoor theatre in a pond. We do have one of those in Warsaw, but since it's been there since the 1700s, it's nowhere near as funky. I do like the idea. It is also the sort of place that will be better in the summer, but even in the cold weather, it's pretty at dusk. And also, past Adam Dollard, who became a national hero by accidentally blowing himself up, look up the Cornwall, Ontario video on the channel. It will loop you back to Sherbrooke. Or else, you could not go north on the St.Lawrence Blvd. You could go the other way, past some old factories and banks and other remnants of the industrial and commercial past, skirting the edges of the former Golden Mile, back into the city, or through the village. It is almost as pretty as the Plateau, but whichever way you go, you'll probably end up back in Sherbrooke. Which is quite alright, because that's exactly where we want to be. And not just for the pretty houses. Well, sort of for the pretty houses, because we're staying in one of them. The Hotel Chateau d'Argois, which was wonderful. You may not sleep much, and showering might be problematic, and breakfast will be, well, French style, but it was wonderful. I'll show you next time. Gremlin on the road.
We
guys came at the right time. If you're going to come in, this is the right time. And if you've never been at Schwartz, it's an experience. Don't you wanna-
I'm ready for these guys to go. They know how to
well,
lead the way.
go ahead,
I'll
sir.
lead the way.
I have room. You
Yeah,
want, or
just
you
one.
want?
Me solo.
You have room at the counter.
Perfect. Thank you.